so collaboration, this module is to basically educate, to allow you to understand how you can import, export IFC files and also work with BCF files. So let me just go on to BIM 21.2.05. It may be slightly new to most of you guys because I think it was released early this week or late last week. So if you have the opportunity, please get this latest release. It will swiftly help you with a lot of bugs. So make sure you have got the template BIM MM and start with a new drawing. For the ease of presentation, or rather for this training, from my side especially, I've docked my panel to the left. Some of you may have the panel on both sides or maybe just on the right side, but for the ease of presentation, I'll have everything all docked here. So if I do say I'm going to access something from the side panel, detail panel, etc., you can easily focus to the left-hand side of the screen. So to begin with everything, before you actually import an IFC file or actually any file, the best thing to go through is the settings. So go into BIM, because we're working on BIM now, obviously, import, export, and then IFC. When you see all the settings all out here, this is the thing, but let me just delete this. This was something at the old, and this should be by default your basic setting that you get when you that ships with your BricsCAD program. So empty mapping file path, empty export file path. We'll go through that later on in detail. And then 3 boxes ticked here, which only refers to spaces, BIM data, and also whether things are off or frozen, that they're not supposed to be imported or not. So the settings almost dictates how you bring a model in, how you bring the information in, whether it's right or wrong, whether some things have disappeared, etc. So it's always vital to make sure your settings are in the correct position. So once you're done, once you're happy with this, close it out. Go on to the menu button here. You might even have the file dialog up there if you have, but I'll normally click onto my Brics icon over here. Go on to import, and what we're going to bring in right now is an architectural model of a typical mid-story building. Let it load for a while, and there you have it. And let me turn on my 3D mouse. You should see my 3D mouse isn't working too well or too smoothly with my Zoom screen. So I would just rely back onto my reliable keyboard. So just a little spin around. And there you have it. Seemingly concealed or contained model. I am just going to drive a section through. Just to show you what the contents are within this model. So as you see, a very typical architectural model without beams, simply walls, no columns, no structural columns, I should say. Some furniture layout, windows, walls, doors, and of course our V21 spaces. If you could remember, it's an upgrade from rooms from V20. So now imagine if you're happy, I'd like to import more information this time around. Maybe I'll import my structural engineers IFC model of the structural model. So _str, just to double check I'm in the correct set, and let it import. The reason why I created that section was because I wanted you to see that the latest import, the second import rather, brought in the beams, brought in the columns, and of course the foundations that would otherwise not be as easy to see if I had my section unclipped, or if I did not even have a section in the first place. So also you can notice that whenever I hover around these guys, my rover tip says it's a warp. So what it means is that the IFC geometry is now successfully imported into BricsCAD as the native geometry. You can see the metadata, the accompanying metadata that came from IFC. So the quantities, the number of price, etc. It works like as though it is from BricsCAD. You can even do extrusions or anything else, because this model is literally what you almost have if you were to import it. If you were to start from scratch in BricsCAD. Whilst this may not be the recommended, I would say, or suggested move to do so, to import your other consultants' drawings or models, because it can be against your local BIM mandates, etc. So, for example, in the UK, you've got things in the BIM ownership written quite clearly in the BIM mandate that you should only be able to XREF someone else's or link someone else's model and not touch their model. You can only touch whatever you've created as part of your ownership. So with that said, now imagine I have this model that I've created in BricsCAD, and I'd like to export this to an IFC. So you can export these elements by default to a default mapping, to their default IFC mapping, I should say, by simply clicking on Export to IFC. But we will do something slightly more special today, which is we will go into settings again. And this time around, remember I mentioned something about the export and import mapping file path. So we go on to export mapping file path, and over here, you can select how your mapping process can go. So before I do that, let me just go back into here. And in your materials, you should find something like this called export mapping 1.txt. Open with a notepad or any text editor, really. And you can find 3 rows over here saying, the first one saying bin DB footing to IFC column, the other one furnishing elements skip, and the other one flow terminal skip. So the first line is basically saying it's going to convert anything from a BricsCAD BIM footing object or anything that's been classified as a footing in BricsCAD BIM to an IFC column, whereas it's going to skip both the furnishing element and the flow terminal. So anything that has been classified in either of these 2 classifications will skip entirely the export process. So this is quite handy. For example, if you like to export a part model or simply specific categories of the selected model, without having you to manually select them and then export these selected entities. So let me just show you. So export mapping file path, obviously, I'll click on this guy. That's the one that I just explained. Click open, I'll close. And right now, what you can do is you can just go straight to this one, or if you like the command line, you can always type IFC export. So when I click this, I'll just click entire model rather than selecting individual entities, like I mentioned earlier, that you can try avoiding. You can hit enter, or me simply clicking the command line. And over here, I'll just put export underscore 1.ifc. So it should be out in a second or so. But before that, let me just recommend you this BIM Vision program, this little software, which is free. We are not sponsored, by the way, by them, or myself being sponsored by them. It's just one of a few kind of third-party free IFC viewers, which I find quite reliable. And it's the best way for me to check if my IFC model has been exported correctly and if the models have been exported correctly. So you can see there are some bits like the window's not exporting correctly, but I'll just hide the walls for now. And if we can compare and remember that we were thinking of first skipping the furnishing elements, now that's disappeared. And also the floor terminals, which I don't think we had in the first place, so that's fine. But the IFC footing, which was over here in the, sorry, not the BIM footing, I do apologize. The BIM footing should be an IFC column now. So this is a way for you to hack or basically customize your mapping process. There are things that you might want to model or classify in a certain way in GridsCAD, but it doesn't mean that you have to export it by using the default mapping process or default mapping method. There is a way by using the txt file as I showed to simply modify your export values. So we can also do a simple exercise again. So what we can do is we can close this guy and go onto here again, and this time around take a look at export mapping to.txt. Again, navigate to a notepad. I could have double clicked, but I just want to show that you can open with something else as well. So this .txt file has been written in such a way that the BIMDB column exports to the IFC column, a beam to a beam, a member, a BIM member, a structural member, to a default IFC configuration, the footing as well, the default classification, but there's an asterisk at the end, and it says skip. So what the asterisks do, or what this star sign does, is it's an operator to refer to all the other non-listed kind of entity types. So anything that is outside these four fellas here, they will be excluded from the export process entirely. So let's just try. So remember, if this was such a case, what you will end up with is simply a structural model, because these are things that are simply in the structural model element. I'm hearing some background noise on my end, so if you could please mute your mic, that would be lovely, so I can concentrate. Thank you. So there you go, export mapping, same model. This time around, go on here. I'll just change this to 2 because it's in the same folder, it's in the same path, just a different text file. Escape. We're going to do the export the long way, or we do right here again, entire model. This time around, 2. BIM Vision again. Open _2, and there you have it. It's now a bare kind of a structural model. So this is quite handy if you have all your elements inside there, which is, I'm not sure, but in my past experience, quite unlikely to have both your structural elements, editable structural elements and architectural elements together. But if you end up in such a case, you can always kind of exclude whatever you don't need and simply export the things that you want in IFC and pass it on to your other collaborators. So beam, 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 column, beam, column. Let's just see, column and beam. Footing, beam, footing, and the rest is all by default the same as what you would expect.